Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Chelsea Blueprint. I'm joined by Chelsea correspondent Dan King and Chelsea content creator Matisse Armani. I don't know why I sound so happy because it was a dismal performance at the weekend against Sunderland. Chelsea without European football again this season. Matisse, did you watch the game and what did you think of it?
Yeah, unfortunately I did. And it was pretty pathetic. Yeah, considering the circumstances of what we needed. I think we were kind of gifted with the scoreline going on at the Amex as well, Brighton against United, so we only needed the point to get Europa League football. And it was a straight shootout, basically, a knockout game almost between us and Sunderland for that position, and we just did not turn up. Dominated for large parts, beaten in most parts of the pitch as well. Very rarely do I go a game where I say I can't really say much about the likes of João Pedro, even though he's had a really strong season. Just didn't really get him involved in the game enough. And our midfield felt like it got second to most balls as well. So it was just a really sad way to kind of end what was already a sad season, because I felt like we had a bit of a get out of jail free card with what was going on at Brighton, and we still just didn't look too interested in taking that opportunity.
Is it not mad to say a straight shootout, almost a knockout game against Sunderland, a newly promoted team, and Chelsea playing on the pitch with world champions in the middle of their chest, lost it. Not only lost it, but didn't even look like fighting in it. I mean, to me, I was at the game and it felt like it felt like Chelsea didn't even turn up. Like you couldn't see anything but red and white shirts anywhere, on and off the pitch, that is. You could have told me that Chelsea weren't there and I would have believed you.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, as Matisse was saying, it kind of a sort of game and performance that summed up the whole season. I mean, you had your bingo card, you had another red card just for good measure from Wesley Fofana, making a record 11 for the season, and this not turning up thing is weird, because if they really wanted Rossini out, as they clearly did, and they did down tools, or they all deny it, then once you've got him out, and also that Alonso is coming, why in that final game are you not going for it when there really was not just a Conference League place to be played for, but a Europa League place there, which is a lot better than Conference League. We'll come on, we'll discuss as to whether being out of Europe is actually a bonus, but there's a Europa League place there, which, for all that Chelsea would hope to be finishing top five next season and qualifying for the Champions League direct, as Villa have proved, it can be useful to have a Europa League place, another way into the Champions League. Let's have this right for this project, which I hate the word, for this to work, but financially and in terms of prestige, and to stop the fans getting really, really, really annoyed, or more annoyed than they are already. You've got to be back in the Champions League. That's the bare minimum for this club, and being in Europa League would have given another avenue for that.
Yeah, that's what Reece James said after the game as well. He said it's the bare minimum, and I feel like that one thing that's really bothered me this season is not necessarily a lack of effort, because we've seen this thing about them being outrun in 97% of matches or something this season, but it's a lack of, for me, and I spoke to Joe Cole about this a few weeks ago as well, it's a lack of feeling connected to the players on the pitch and the people that are supposed to be representing your football club, the team that you've grown up supporting and the team that you love. And people travel. I can't believe fans travelled all the way to Sunderland, and it felt like they got a bit of a clap at the end. A couple of players went over and said, maybe Enzo Fernandez waved his goodbyes, but for those fans to travel all that way, I mean, I drove 4 hours there and I got paid to do it, and I got to sit in a lovely seat and got food. And these fans, they paid for that experience, and they get a little clap at the end of what's been a tragic season. And it feels like none of the players, even apart from Reece James, have come out and taken any kind of accountability, even on social media or whatever players do nowadays. They prefer to do that than go to the media and speak out. But it feels like there's just a lack of accountability from top to bottom at Chelsea.
Yeah, I mean, that was shown, I think, in the programme notes before the Tottenham game, I believe, before the FA Cup final, I believe. And yeah, for me, it's I don't even think Reece James's comments were even covering it, to be honest, either. I don't feel like the words were stern enough. I don't feel like they were harsh enough. I feel like he maybe isn't the type of character to do that as well. But the team, all the way up to the ownership and the board, there isn't enough accountability for the season. And I feel like that is what happens when you finish 3 times out of the first 4 years under this Blue co-ownership outside of the Champions League places. And let's not forget, even when they did get Champions League last year, it was by the skin of their teeth on the last day at Nottingham Forest. So Chelsea have spent just as much time in the middle of the table in those seasons. I remember the Pochettino season, we spent about a good 80% of the time in 10th or 9th. So managed to miraculously get 6th after five games at the end. So this project really does spend a significant portion of its time in the middle of the table. And that mindset is only going to drip feed into the players at some point. Obviously, there's some fatigue, question marks, Club World Cup, playing definitely more minutes than any other Premier League team this season, going into the latter stages of the FA Cup, the latter stage of the Carabao Cup. But they knew this going into the season. So you didn't have the squad to contend. And I didn't like a lot of our squad filler signings, the likes of Gittins, the likes of Delap, the likes of Garnacho. But even I'm shocked with the lack of contribution from some of those players. You're talking about 1 goal from Delap all season, 1 goal from Garnacho. Again, Lavia's fitness nowhere near where it needs to be to contribute and come in for Enzo or Caicedo. Gittins has been injured for a large portion of it as well. So a mixture of maybe some of the key players checking out, also gassing out, and then the squad players not contributing has led us to where we are right now.
I think if you compare and contrast, I mean, obviously it's a different situation with Spurs and the massive relief with them not actually getting relegated, which at least for this season has not been a consideration for Chelsea. I know some fans are going over the top and thinking it might become that. But if you look at the words of De Zerbi after the game, of Polinia after the game, and Mickey van der Ven after the game, you can say, oh, yes, it's great to be wise after the event. But there was some accountability there. There was some recognition that this is absolutely, this is totally unacceptable and unforgivable. And there was some proper emotion behind it. And of course, it's a bit different because Chelsea have got a new manager coming in, but he's not here now to sort of do a rallying call like De Zerbi was. But it feels like there's a little bit of a danger of a bit of drift between now and whenever Alonso arrives to start, steering the good ship Chelsea back on course. And it'll be really interesting to see what Chelsea do as a club and as players and as directors of football and whatever else in the next 6 weeks to just try and change the narrative, try and get the positivity going again, because it feels like the positivity that, the kind of bounce that came from appointing Alonso has sort of, fallen flat again with what's happened with the Sunderland game and the not getting in Europe at all.
Matisse, whilst we stay on the Sunderland game just for now, and then we'll move on to the season as a whole. But one of the things that really did kind of catch my attention was Enzo Fernandez at the end of the game. He puts his 2 arms in the air, and it looks like a goodbye to me. But he wasn't overly emotional. He didn't spend ages with the fans. He hasn't done anything on social media afterwards. I just wanted to get your thoughts basically on if you think he'll leave, if you think he should leave, and what you think Chelsea do if he does decide he wants to go.
I think it's 1 foot in, 1 foot out with him. He can't guarantee his own transfer because his contract length tells you that he doesn't have much power or say so in the matter. And obviously the fee that Chelsea are going to want, at least on the book value, is still north of, I think, 60 million plus. And I think valuation-wise, he's definitely, in this market with these midfielders going around, I'd still say he's worth more than that. Even his performances are polarizing, but I think at least the output is there this season. I think he's got over 20 goals and assists in from midfield, which is not easy to do, especially in this day and age. So I feel like with him, I think it all depends on the system. I can see how Xabi Alonso would take a liking to him in terms of the profile, because they're almost in somewhat ways similar in terms of Xabi Alonso's style and his playing career and the way that he saw the game. Xabi Alonso, I think, would want to work with a player that's won the World Cup, that has a winning mentality, that demands more from this football club to perform, even if it is in a way where you are flirting with Real Madrid. But I think, I've said it before, I think some of our biggest legends of the past would have flirted with the exit, and have flirted with the exit even back then, if Chelsea were performing in this manner and recruiting in this manner and acting in the way we've acted in the last 4 years. So I don't think it's abnormal for a player that wants to achieve things to be looking at this Chelsea project, I put that in quotes, and questioning whether they should carry on with it. He was the first one here. You have to remember, he was signed from Benfica for a record fee on deadline day in January, the first window of Win Stanley, I think, and Lawrence Stewart. And he's one of the ones that wants to leave. It's not a good reflection on what's going on. But
yeah, and you're right, Matisse.
Yeah,
sorry. So you're right in terms of the value as well. I think, I've been doing some back of an envelope calculations. You say, I think Fernandez's value on the books could be actually closer to 70 than 60, but whether it's 60 or 70, Chelsea are going to want 90 or 100, or should be even to think about it. Because it's not just wanting to make the financial profit, although of course we know that is important to the model that Blueco have. But it's like, well, it's like what happens with Declan Rice, for instance, or with and various other players in the past, big players who've been sold for like 100 million plus. You think of or Harry Kane, for instance, at Spurs, really key players. It's all very well getting the money for these players, but how do you use that to replace their output? Someone like Kane or Rice, it's very hard to find anybody in the world of football who can do all the things they do, and that's why they cost so much money. So you're really looking at trying to find 2 or 3 really good players who can try and fill in the gap somewhere else. And as you say, Matisse, whatever you think of Fernandez and the way he's behaved this season, he's been Chelsea's second best player of the season. He's delivered at times where it's been required, like the FA Cup semi-final, and he is on his day world class. And I think you'd have to think long and hard if you're at Chelsea. Even if you got £100 million bid for a player who maybe doesn't want to be there anymore, it's like, well, okay, that's fine. That's really good profit. But who are the people we're going to bring in who are going to make up for what we're losing in Fernandez? And I personally, this is a conversation for the day, I think there are potentially other of the crown jewels of Chelsea who are more easily replaceable and might make you a bigger profit. But we can talk about that another day.
I think it's all system dependent as well. I think if we're playing a back three, we've seen under the last 3 managers, none of them have really favoured him in the pivot. Because they don't feel like he can get across the ground quickly enough to help Caicedo. And I would agree with that. I think it's quite clear that when he plays deeper, even though his passing and maybe some deep line playmaking can come into it, his athleticism is not there to kind of help Caicedo, like a Nemanja Matic or Mikel, that type of profile. Casemiro at Man United, even though he's a lot older, 1 game a week. You need a Rodri, you need someone like that kind of profile next to Caicedo if you're going to play a 2. So they've always shoved him into the 10 and made him into a box crasher, and that's worked out for him. If we're playing a 3-man midfield, I think it can work. So I think it depends on the system and also how financially, what the situation is now, no Europe and all of that.
Dan, you said Enzo's been one of Chelsea's best players this season. Let's get into a bit of a review of the season for the last 10, 12 minutes or so of the episode. It was obviously a rough season for Chelsea, but it started so well. I remember not too long ago I was sat here saying Chelsea are in the title race after playing Arsenal. So it was kind of a season of 2 halves, if you will. We're going to get into what normally we'll do a stock section of the show based on each game, but Sunderland was so bad that I don't think anyone's stock rose from that performance. Maybe Mike Pender's, given that he'll be coming in, even though he didn't play. But we're going to do it instead on the basis of the whole season. So I'm going to ask you both one player whose stock rose and one player whose stock fell from the start of the season to now. I'd imagine we'll have similar answers for whose stock rose the most, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Matisse, if you can start us off, whose stock rose for you the most this season?
I think João Pedro's an easy one, just because of the goal tally. I wasn't expecting him to get those numbers. He's never got those numbers before at Brighton, and he took a lot of penalties. He didn't take any penalties this season. And also, obviously, just the overall all-round play was fantastic. The variety of finishing, left foot long shot against Napoli, etc. But I'd also like to throw in a less obvious shout in Hato, especially in 2026, because Cucurella has been nowhere near the level, and I think he's still only 19 or 20, and he's stepped up massively.
Dan, how about you?
Well, I was going to say exactly the same too. I think Pedro is. I know he is a divisive figure, as most Chelsea players seem to be with Chelsea fans these days. But and I was certainly one of the people that when they paid over 50 million quid for someone with that few assists and that few goals in his time at Wolves, he thought, what is he going to bring? But the fact is, he's had his most productive season so far playing in English football, which means for me his stock has risen just purely in his numbers. But I think, again, a bit like João Pedro, even when the performances have been bad, even when the creativity, and you have to come to that, the lack of creativity at times Chelsea has been a problem. Or maybe the lack of end products. I think they've created a lot of chances, but the lack of end product has been a problem. I think Neto has kept running, and unlike certain of wingers on the opposite flank, Neto does his defensive work. So I don't think he has let Chelsea down at all in terms of his effort this season. Now, I still don't think he's a £50 million winger, but I think he's better than I thought he was going to be, and I would still say one of their better overall performers across the whole of the season.
I agree with you guys that João Pedro and Hato, it's hard to go against them really. They've both had really good seasons. Hato, like you said, especially since the turn of the year, has been really, really good. And Cucurella, that's coincided with Cucurella's drop-off. For me, I would just agree with those two. For me, we'll go into the stock falling section, and for me, it has to be Cole Palmer. I mean, he had a really good end to the season, played really well in the Conference League final last season, and then went into the Club World Cup and was really good in that as well, especially in the final against PSG. And there was kind of hope that he would come into this season and really kick on after he hadn't really been the same player he was under Pochettino. But it has to be Palmer for me. There's a number of players. There's so many players that you could say for this one. I think Robert Sanchez over the course of this season, Marc Cucurella as well. There's plenty, but who do you guys think? Whose stock's fallen for you two?
There's loads of options. So Palmer's certainly one of them, because I think the expectation versus the output is such a massive contrast. Probably the biggest one in the squad this season. I'd actually throw in as well Gusto. I think Gusto this season defensively has been awful at times. I think some of the frailties in terms of him kind of losing his man at the back post. I don't think he's been good in possession at times. He's been, whether it's loose touches, his crossing hasn't really been anywhere near it. But again, sometimes he doesn't. Under Maresca, he wasn't really getting the opportunity at times to even overlap in the first place. So he's going into midfield. I just feel like he's been a bit all over the place. I don't know if that's because positionally his job got more complicated when Maresca was in charge, to kind of invert and then to go and play as an 8 against Liverpool, as opposed to the overlapping flying fullback that Pochettino kind of gave him. But yeah, I don't feel like I can trust him to do any phase of the game. Build up play, I feel like he could lose the ball. Defensively, I feel like he could get beat. Defensively, I feel like he could lose his man in the box on the back post. I just feel like everything with him, I can't trust him to take on his man if it's a wing-back formation either, which I think is important. We saw that with Victor Moses under Conte. Frimpong even can do it at Leverkusen before he went to Liverpool. Right now, there's just not much there with him. So
the other person I'd probably add in is Andre Santos, which is quite harsh for a young man. But I think the big hope was, particularly when Rosina came in, because he'd worked with him at Strasbourg, that Santos was going to be the man who could take some of the pressure off the central midfielders, could rotate in for Caicedo, could rotate in for Fernandez, and Chelsea not notice the difference. But with some very rare exceptions, you always did notice the difference. And it feels to me like there's been talk of quite large bids, I think, from clubs in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia and from elsewhere for Santos. He would be an easy way to make a profit, because I don't think he's shown himself enough. And with talk of Valentin Barco coming in, who would offer that versatility, not only to play in the centre midfield, but also has a history of playing as a wing back. It feels to me that that Santos is expendable, and they'll be looking for better alternatives. We know that one of the areas that Alonso wants to strengthen with a first team ready player is in that centre midfield, because as you said, Matisse unfortunately just can't rely on Romeo Lavia. I mean, I thought there were times when he came on and played, even when he came on for the last 20 minutes, and you could see patterns of play which hadn't been there for the whole season, but he just doesn't play enough. Just coming back to your point on Sanchez, Lloyd, and that Arsenal game, that Arsenal game still feels so weird to me, because as Rossini admitted himself, Arsenal are one of the best pressing teams in the world. So why do you say to your team for the first time really that we're going to religiously play out from the back against Arsenal? Because it just set, the mistakes he made off his feet early on set the tone for the whole game, and undoubtedly, whatever he says, led to the lack of confidence which caused the later errors. And it happened not just in that game, but in other games too. And I think if we're going to throw it forward, one of the things Alonso's got to do, he's got to build some patterns of play. For not just going forward, because as we said, Chelsea created a lot of chances. I think they're certainly for a lot of the season, their expected goals was the highest in the Premier League, but they need to. A lot of those chances were coming from crosses or from transitions. But if you're going to be a serious winning team that wins Premier Leagues and Champions League, which is what we're told the owners want, then you need to be able to control games. You need patterns of play, and that starts, if you're going to play from the back, that starts from the back, and you need to have players and a system. And this is maybe where one advantage alleged of not being in Europe is that Alonso is going to be able to work for weeks at a time on the training ground, drilling whatever his preferred system and philosophy is into the team.
Personally, I'm a bit torn because I've got the journalist perspective and the fan perspective of this issue, where I would quite like some European trips next season, maybe to Milan or Turin if Chelsea are in the Europa League. Even the Conference League last season brought us some really fun trips to different places. I was in the final in Wroclaw and that was brilliant. But as a fan, I think maybe it will do Chelsea some good to be out of Europe, and it will offer them a chance to get rid of some of the dead wood in the squad. But also we've seen what it's done for Man United this season, in the sense it's really given them a bit of time to implement Michael Carrick's ideas and given him time to work with the squad. I think Xabi Alonso will benefit from that a bit. So it's up in the air, really. There's positives and negatives, obviously, to any outcome, but Chelsea are going to have to cut their squad. What do you two think to that?
It certainly does. It certainly gives him more time to work on the training ground. It gives maybe the ownership opportunities to trim the squad drastically and get rid of a lot of the players that don't make any sense going forward, and not then feel the need. Yeah, they just don't make any sense. So a lot of the players that we have, they don't relate to each other in terms of how we're trying to, like, you look at Liam Delap, a lot of the football that he played at Ipswich was very transitional. It was very like direct football, get the ball up to Liam Delap into the channels, go long, let him get in the tussles, let him get in the duels. This is potentially a more possession-based, patient, technical type of philosophy that Xabi Alonso is going to bring in. Also the counter-pressing as well, which I don't think has been anywhere near the level it needs to be in comparison to where it was under Nicholas Jackson when he was here. So it just doesn't make sense. Aerially, he hasn't brought anything to the table, even with the crosses. So players like that, they definitely skipped a step, and they should have gone into, at most, mid-table Premier League teams to continue developing, keep playing week in, week out. But I think from a fan perspective, I'm gutted, because I looked at the teams that were going into the Europa League next season, and I thought, I would have been up for that. And I think we're not going to win the league next year, and unless something miraculous happened with the transfer window, and we did a 10 out of 10, and we brought in, your Ossimens or your Alvarez up front, or we brought in Bastoni. We're talking needle movers across 5 positions that just went straight to the 11 and just catapulted this team up to another level. Considering the managers right now of no Pep is more than an even playing field, that is the kind of summer that would quantify or justify not having European football. I think if you're not going to do what we did under Conte, I don't think Champions League qualification is good enough to let European football go and not win that Europa League and add to the trophy cabinet in that way. So for me, I would have preferred European football, because I feel like top 4, top 5 is not, after 5 years in this project and with the context of not having European football, just to get back into it. And then next season, more games. It's just, you're almost becoming like an Aston Villa, even though they went back to back. But Newcastle had this issue as well, where you're just yo-yoing in and out of Champions League football, depending on the context of what you have games-wise in that season.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Conte. I think that that's the classic example of going from 1 year out of Europe to winning the title, as Chelsea did. But there are other clubs of similar size, and the clubs that like to think they're Big Six, including Spurs, where a season completely out of Europe has allowed them to move either up into Champions League places or to move significantly up the table. And obviously Manchester United is the great example this season. They've climbed sort of 12 places, partly because of the benefit of that, and obviously the main benefit was getting rid of Emery and bringing in Carrick, and then actually using the advantages they already have. So there is history there of not being in Europe being good for clubs of Chelsea's size. And I think the reality is, whether it's good or bad, it is the reality. That is what's happening, and Chelsea have got to make the best of it. I mean, it would be great for Chelsea if they could bring in 5 game-changing players. I don't think, even if they make some really great sales, they've got the money to bring in 5 game-changing players this summer. And have they got the pull as well? I mean, Alonso adds pull. Have they got the pull to bring in 5 game-changing players? I think the mood music coming out of the club is they're looking for at least 2, preferably 3 players ready to come in and be first team regulars and make a real difference. And I think the core of a really good squad is there, and that's where the directors and Danny Finkelstein are right. I mean, there is a core of a good squad there, but there's a massive amount of dead wood to get rid of, to make room, and you don't need this many players when you're not playing in Europe. But you've got to actually start building the blocks. You've got to be thinking, right, in the 27-28 season we're going to be back in Europe, so we are going to need more players. So you've got to be thinking long term and getting in not only these first team ready players, but also guys who are going to be better backup than what Chelsea have had this season. Because I think the stand-ins, like your Santoses, like your Delaps, have not been good enough this season. And if all goes well, in 2 seasons' time, they're going to be back in Europe and they're going to need to compete on all fronts, because Chelsea fans will not tolerate this happening again.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for on this episode of the Chelsea Blueprint. I want to say thank you very much to all of you who have watched this channel in its debut season, the Chelsea Sunsport YouTube channel. It's been a pleasure having you join us week after week throughout the season, even when things have been rough as they have been this week. We will see you again next season, and we'll keep you posted throughout the summer with more Chelsea news, and me and Dan will be at the World Cup. But don't forget to follow Matisse as well, because he's always bringing you some brilliant Chelsea content here or there. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next season, but also throughout the summer. Thank you very much. Goodbye.